Hello everyone, my name is Ashley Fontaine and this is my PowerPoint presentation on ethical leadership in the clinical lab, navigating a zero tolerance policy and patient safety. I decided to do ethical case 1. Here's a case summary, the zero tolerance dilemma. A zero tolerance policy. The lab director instituted a strict punitive policy in the coagulation section due to a previous patient safety event. This policy included a written warning for a first error and a 3-day suspension without pay for a second. The unreported mistake. A CLS named James, who had already received a written warning, made a clerical error by swapping the PT results of 2 different patients. Fearing the suspension and its impact on his finances, he decided to conceal the mistake. The error directly led to a patient, Robert, being harmed when a physician increased his Coumadin dose based on the inaccurate lab results, causing him to experience excessive bleeding that required a blood transfusion and surgery. The cover-up. When questioned by the lab director, James lied and denied knowing any mistake. The director did not perform any further investigation, leading to the error uncorrected. Ethical challenge. I, as a coworker, were aware of the initial error and later overheard James lie to the director. This puts me in a position to choose between protecting a colleague and upholding my professional duty to ensure patient safety and lab integrity. This slide talks about the initial reactions and the role of ethics. This case is an example of a manager's mistake directly leading to an employee's ethical breach. My initial reaction was to feel disappointed in James, which I still am disappointed in James. But the zero tolerance policy created an environment where hiding an error felt like the only option. In the fast-paced world of clinical labs, it can be easy to prioritize speed over accuracy. However, professionalism in this field is about more than just technical competence. It also requires a commitment to the code of ethics. This case touches on several key ethical principles: honesty and integrity. James intentionally concealed the fact that he switched the patient's results, and he lied about it when being confronted about it. Patient safety versus personal consequence. James put himself over the patient because he was afraid of a 3-day suspension and its impact on his finances. Accountability. The zero tolerance policy aims to force accountability, but James demonstrated a failure to be accountable for his mistake. Justice and fairness. The lab's punitive zero tolerance policy raises questions about whether it is a just and fair approach to managing errors. It may discourage staff from reporting mistakes, potentially leading to worse outcomes for patients. Professional responsibility. It is James's professional obligation to report errors and ensure accurate patient results, and this is a duty he failed to uphold. The critical impact of lab errors. A foundation for medical decisions. Clinical laboratories are a critical part of modern medicine, with an estimated 70% of all medical conditions relying on their results. A doctor's decision to prescribe antibiotics, for example, is often based on the results of a rapid strep test. Diagnostic errors and patient harm. Lab errors are a significant contributor to diagnostic errors, which affects millions of Americans each year. Errors or inaccuracies can lead to misdiagnosis, inappropriate treatment, and even life-threatening consequences. The problem with the punitive policy. A punitive zero-tolerance policy for errors can be counterproductive, as it may cause laboratory professionals to hide their mistakes rather than report them. This undermines the quality management and quality assurance goals of the lab. There's also legal consequences. The lab director is responsible for ensuring the quality management plan is implemented. But if an error results in a false claim for payment, it can lead to severe legal and financial consequences for the lab, including penalties under the False Claims Act. On this slide, I provide more detail about what coagulation testing is, what was at stake. The errors target. James' mistake involved the PT and INR, which accesses the ability to clot blood. PT-INR function. PT measures the extrinsic pathway of the coagulation cascade. The INR is a standardized version of the PT to ensure results are consistent across all labs. The clinical significance. Monitoring anticoagulants, PT-INR, is crucial for monitoring patients on blood thinners like warfarin. Warfarin interferes with clotting factors, so the dose must be carefully adjusted. The target range. Patients must maintain a specific target INR range, 2.0 to 3.0 for some conditions, to balance the risk of excessive bleeding and dangerous clot formation. The chart next to it just talks about the incorrect results and the implications of the incorrect results. All right, let's debate the zero tolerance policy. Now that we have analyzed the case, let's take a closer look at the central conflict, the punitive zero tolerance policy. We'll engage in a brief informal debate to explore a different perspective. So, perspective A4. Argue that strict policies are the only way to ensure staff are careful and that without them errors can be rampant. A fear of punishment is a powerful motivation for compliance and can prevent serious mistakes. Perspective B, against. Argue that such policies are counterproductive because they create a culture of fear that encourages the concealment of errors, which ultimately poses a greater risk to patient safety. A non-punitive system that focuses on the root cause analysis is more effective in the long run. So according to a study on medical errors, diagnostic errors, which include lab errors, are a significant contributor to patient harm. About 1 in 20 adults in the U.S. will experience a diagnostic error each year. So here are some questions for thought. Is a zero tolerance policy appropriate in a clinical laboratory setting? Why or why not? What responsibility does a coworker have to report an error they witness, especially if they know what the repercussions are for a colleague? Could this situation have been prevented by better communication between the lab and the clinical staff? Please let me know what you think. Now let's go over the discussion questions that are associated with this case. What ethical issues are at stake? The main ethical problems are about being honest and keeping patients safe. James was not honest when he hid the mistake because he was worried about losing his job and not getting a loan. His choice put his own needs ahead of a patient's health. This goes against the main rule of lab work, making sure patients are safe. The lab's zero tolerance policy is also a problem. It was so strict that it made James afraid to tell the truth, which led to a worse outcome for the patient. Will you report the conversation you had with James to the lab director? Yes, I would feel obligated to do it. Even though I had known James from school and he was a friend, but our main reason to be there is to make sure that patients are safe. And because James lied and I overheard him, Staying quiet would make me part of the cover-up and could lead to more harm. What role did you play in this error? Should you have said something? I played a part by not saying anything when James initially told me about his mistake. I should have told him right away that he needed to report it no matter what. If I had, he might have done the right thing and the patient wouldn't have been hurt. This is a continuation of the discussion questions. So who is ultimately at fault? The blame is shared. James is most at fault because he made the mistake, hid it, and lied. But the lab director is also to blame for setting up such a harsh policy that made an employee hide a dangerous error. My silence also played a role in the problem. Should the lab have a zero tolerance policy? Absolutely not. A zero tolerance policy is a bad idea in the lab. Instead of punishing people for every mistake, a lab should have a system where people feel safe to report errors. This way, the lab can find out why mistakes are happening, fix them, which makes things safer for everyone. Would the patient have been harmed if the error was reported right away? No. The patient would have not been harmed. If James would have reported his mistake, the lab would have corrected the results and the doctor would have made a good decision based on the right information. This shows that the biggest problem was not the mistake, but the choice to hide it. Right here, we will talk about the proposed solutions and justification. Solution 1, implement a just culture. What is it? The lab director should replace the harsh zero tolerance policy with a just culture model. This approach focuses on understanding why an error happened rather than just punishing the person who made it. Why does this work? This method encourages people to report their mistakes, allowing the lab to learn from them and fix the system problems. This aligns with the principles of quality management and continuous improvement. It also helps the manager direct and channel the behavior of all personnel to accomplish the organization's mission. Solution 2, immediate reporting and investigation. What is it? You must immediately report James's lie and the initial error to the lab director. This is the most ethical action to take as it prioritizes patient safety above all else. Why it works. This action directly resolves the immediate threat to patient welfare and upholds the professional standard of accountability. It also allows the lab director to fulfill their responsibility of ensuring medically reliable data is being generated and appropriately reported. My recommendation is a two-part approach. The best solution is a mix of both. First, you must report the error to address the immediate patient safety issue. Then, the laboratory director must use this incident as a reason to implement a long-term solution. A new, non-punitive system. This comprehensive approach resolves the current crisis while also fixing the flawed policy that contributed to the problem in the first place. This is my last and final slide with information. Ethics is an imperative, not an option. Ethical leadership matters. This case shows that a manager's policy and leadership style can have a direct impact on an employee's behavior and, most importantly, patient safety. A punitive policy created an environment that led to a cover-up which harmed a patient. Accountability is shared. While James made a personal ethical choice to conceal his mistake, the problem was also enabled by a flawed system and a punitive policy. Everyone in the lab, from the director to the individual lab scientists, have a shared professional responsibility to ensure quality and safety. The ethical imperative. Ethical considerations are not just guidelines. They are a moral compass that must guide every action in the lab. Upholding ethical standards is crucial for patient safety and maintaining public trust in the medical professional. A call to action. As future laboratory managers and professionals, You must prioritize a culture of honesty, integrity, and non-punitive reporting. This is essential for ensuring that patient care remains at the forefront of this profession. Thank you.